this time of year, we kind of had been hearing for a week that Kelsey Plum was maybe going to be making her return tonight, and then not tonight, this morning, and then last night she gets traded, and now she's suddenly not going to play. How does that change kind of how you prepare for these types of
things? I mean, we had 2 different scouts prepared, so I think just always being prepared for scenarios like this. I think, the scout with Plum and without Plum's definitely different, but Brittany had 2 sorters, and we just went through everything this morning, and feel good about the game plan. I think, I think we're used to these scenarios, so we feel ready and prepared for the game today.
What is it like just managing the emotions around this time of year when people in your locker room could be on the move,
Yeah, I think the strength of the main strengths we have as a group, I think, is the culture and camaraderie around the group, and also just being so process orientated every single day. So yeah, I just the engagement, focus from the team and film and practice. The last week it's been outstanding. I think it's couldn't ask for more as a group, and it's just every day, like we've said since the start of the year, it's all about continuing to get better, and I think players have done a great job just getting on with our business every single day and with the intention of getting better.
How do those conversations go for you mid-season or during the season with you and Vanya and her staff when it comes to this time of year trade deadline? I know your whole organization is collaborative, but when it comes to trade talks and stuff, are you being involved in this stuff, or you kind of just tell Vanya, do whatever you're going to do and I'll deal with the
Yeah, no, Vanya does an incredible job just looping us in as a coaching staff, which I think is so much appreciated. So I know our front office is working really hard always to look at the roster and what we can do to keep getting better. And then when there are updates, if there are no updates, Vanya's always communicating with us. So I think it's great just to have that communication. I think that's really important, just having that two-way communication constantly between coaching staff, front office, etc.
And how does Brittany, having you just mentioned Brittany and how important she was in preparing these scouts, she also kind of has that unique role where she's kind of on your staff and on Vanya's staff. How does that kind of help bridge the gap?
Yeah, I think it is such a unique role, Sean. I think it's something that hasn't come up much. I think this is probably the first time we've seen this in professional basketball. I love the concept of it. I think especially in our first season, workload has been very high on the coaching staff with things like scouts and things of that nature. So I think it's definitely going to be a case of in the off season saying, I think that's when we get the greatest benefit from Brittany then being obviously more focused on the front office role. And I think it's something for all of us in these hybrid roles, it is something so new, and I think I've seen some really good things come from it this year, but I think that's going to be something great in the off season just to think about, all right, how can we really review everything from this year and get the full benefit from all these hybrids in performance, coaching, front office. But I think the concept's been great. I think it just having that role really allows for thoughts, ideas from the coaching side to then be articulated and explained on the front office side, and vice versa for things front office is talking about to come back to the coaching side. So I believe roles like that are part of the future in basketball. I think it's just a case of, more teams being bold and brave enough to go down that route.
When you look at where you guys are at in the season, how do you feel like the constraints-led approach has panned out so far?
Yeah, no, I think CLA is a big part of what we do. I do think, being completely honest, at times it does get over-reported, and I get that. It is something different, it's something new, but I think, I think there's other things which are more important or just as important. For instance, how we're actually playing tactically, offensively and defensively, because if there aren't sound principles there, kind of what you do in practice really makes no sense. And at the end of the day, CLA is just a tool to kind of implement your offense and your defense. It's a teaching framework. It's not an offensive or a defensive system like a lot of people believe it is. And then you've got other things like your culture and how you're running film sessions, what your performance team are doing and how you integrate with them, analytics. So I think it's a lens we're using in all these departments, and I think you see things occasionally like, when we shot for 10 minutes in socks, and that's like 0.01% of our total practice time for the season. I think a lot of what we do in practice is just, let's recreate different slices of the game, and 3-on-3, Spain pick and roll. These are the covers. You got a 6-second clock. It's very intuitive. I think that's why the players have bought in so well, because they've seen how logical it is, how much sense it makes, and just how it makes them better. So I think it's definitely it's part of our DNA, but it's not the only thing. Yeah.
This is a little off topic, actually.
Oh, go
sorry.
for it.
I feel like everyone who gets into coaching is generally very hyper competitive, and I'm wondering, how do you sort of satisfy that itch when you're not thinking about the fire?
Yeah. So just in terms of what things I'm doing outside of basketball, so I think something I'm really intentional with is just downtime. My fiance Georgia, she lives here with me, so we get out a lot, just whether it's going for a hike, enjoying what Portland has to offer, going for a coffee, going out for dinner. I think, and really trying to not think basketball. And I think this is something that I've got better at when I first moved here, and even in the 2 years with the Cavs. Just, I think you're always switched on as a coach, and I think it's really hard to make decisions and make really good decisions, or even just be ready to be your best when it comes to the games if you're not being intentional with things like burnout and actually self-care and what you're doing in your coach routine. And there's actually been a lot of research done talking about the lives of coaches and assistant coaches in professional collegiate sports, and how, unfortunately, things like burnout are so common. I think a lot of it comes into how we try and optimize our days. So, we're never doing coach meetings at like 8 a.m. I just don't believe in that. The coach meetings, when we have them, are really short and efficient. And I don't want people to ever feel like they're doing busy work. So it's trying to be really intentional as a staff in terms of, how can we let you guys feel as good as possible? Because at the end of the day, your players will, if your staff are feeling well rested, energetic, and they come with great ideas, to me, I've always felt like that has the best impact on the players, versus if they're tired, they're burning out, and they're not coming with good ideas. Well, that's going to directly translate to a player when they're getting a one-on-one film session, and it's not thoughtful, it's not creative, and it's just a mishmash of random clips. So I actually, when I got this job, I read a lot of research into just how you kind of manage a group of people and how you lead them, and trying to be really intentional. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, culture kind of gets looked at as something that's only relevant for the players and how the players are feeling. But I think if you're talking about things like having an environment of joy, well, it's actually even more important that you have that with your staff. So that's kind of, to answer the question properly, I'm very intentional with things like using my off days, and, on off days, I avoid messaging the staff unless it's something super important that really has to take place. And the staff know on our Slack channel, which we use to communicate, I don't want any communication outside of Slack, no texts, no emails, it's all in one place. And if it's an off day, we're using our off days to come recharge the next day. And I think, unfortunately, in professional sports, there's a lot of grind culture, sacrifice, and I've always thought, like, if you want to get to the best and be the best, well, you've actually got to be the best in terms of how you recover, how you recharge, and what you're doing outside of basketball. I hope that answers it.
Yeah. You play paddleboard with the Thorns coach, right?
Yeah, I play paddle a lot, so that's actually one of my hobbies for de-stressing, and just I love it. It's even things like working out before every game. I get a workout in with our strength coach. I think it's so important in this day and age to use those kind of self-care strategies. Yeah.